Hi there. Welcome to this video series on the cognitive challenges of effective teaching. I'm Stephen Chu. I'm a professor of psychology at Stanford University.
And I'm Bill Servin, formerly of the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse and director of the Center for Advancing Teaching and Learning.
Bill and I put together this video series to help teachers understand the cognitive challenges of effective teaching that they face in the classroom. Both Bill and I come from a cognitive research background, but we've also been deeply involved with the scholarship of teaching and learning for the last 20 years. And then we also have spent our careers at teaching intensive institutions. So we've seen the entire gamut from research to actual teaching practice. And what we want to do in this video series is to synthesize the research and the practice into valuable videos that will be helpful to use as teachers.
As Steve pointed out, both of us have been at teaching institutions for several decades. And one of the perspectives you get in that kind of setting is that you're exposed to all the latest ideas about how to be a good teacher. And so this particular table is something that Steve and some colleagues put together a few years ago, and one that I then embellished. And we're calling it the Innovative Best Practices for Transformative Learning. And that's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek title, but what it basically illustrates is that here are documented dozens, in fact, almost 100 different examples of teaching strategies, entire pedagogies that were initially designed and promoted as a kind of silver bullet that would automatically make education better. And I will say that, and I know Steve has as well, there are probably at least 24 of these on here that I myself have employed over the years, and would also say that I gave them up eventually, most of them at least. And what this illustrates is that I think what Steve and I have tried to suggest is that to a great degree, higher education is kind of fad driven, that there's a new strategy that's highly promoted. It tends to be adopted initially by early adopters who are very excited and enthusiastic about it because they get positive results. But as time goes by, the results tend to even out and not too many people adopt it. And eventually the results get to be mixed. Instructors lose their enthusiasm, and there goes the fad, only to be replaced by one of the other fads.
Yeah, so Bill and I wrote an essay a few years ago called Teaching and Learning Lost in a Buzzword Wasteland, to try and make this point and to talk about what teaching needs to do in order to move forward. And our solution to this was actually a big picture overarching theory about what is really important for teachers to be able to accomplish in order to teach effectively. So this is a different approach than what you see currently, where we have like this emphasis on best practices or high impact practices. The focus there is on the practice, as if the teachers just do this practice or follow this practice, automatically they're going to be effective teachers. What Bill and I are arguing is that what's really important is what the teacher knows, the mental model the teacher uses to implement teaching. All teachers have a mental model of how students learn, and this model determines which techniques they pick, how they implement them, how they adapt when things don't go well. And to the extent that this model is accurate and is comprehensive, they'll be effective teachers. And to the extent that this model is incomplete or in error, if there are misconceptions, it's going to hurt their teaching. So that is what our approach is, to outline the cognitive challenges for teachers so that they will know what possible problems may arise in the classroom and what challenges they have to address with their pedagogy. So we created these challenges here, and we outlined 9 of them based on a synthesis of the cognitive research And we're going to go down, go through and talk about each one really briefly. I start with student mental mindset. This is the attitudes and beliefs that students bring in to the classroom with them. Do I think this course is valuable? Do I enjoy this subject? This includes growth mindset, which is, there's been a lot written about with Carol Dweck's work, but it's broader than that. It's students' whole attitude and belief system. Then there's student fear and mistrust, which oftentimes doesn't get a lot of attention, but the student comes in wondering if the teacher is there to help them succeed, or if the teacher is there to weed them out and to sort of create a barrier to their progress. So that anxiety and that mistrust can actually get in the way of effective teaching.
Right. And then I think we all know that students adopt various kinds of strategies that they use in order to learn and study in our classes. And I think the research has been pretty compelling on this issue, that students really vary quite dramatically in terms of the effectiveness of those strategies. In fact, there are even some trends that show that students tend to adopt some of the most ineffective strategies. For example, students may underline, may highlight, or even reread material. All three of those strategies have been found to be relatively ineffective compared to other strategies less well known and less well used, such as self-testing. Then another challenge is organized around students' own awareness and understanding of their own learning and thinking. That's the idea of metacognition and self-regulation. So one of the things we've all noticed in classes is that some students seem to be well aware and able to predict their own learning, aware when they're not doing well, they monitor the comprehension, and other students tend to have relatively weak metacognitive skills. And both of those situations have an effect on whether students can really regulate their learning effectively on their own. Of course, that's kind of a goal of teaching, is to make students more independent and regulate their own learning. Another really important challenge is the challenge of prior knowledge. That is that what you know about a topic will have a very strong effect on what you're able to learn about that topic going forward. So it's often the case that students don't have much background knowledge or prior knowledge about a topic, and that seriously limits their ability to do well in our classes, and even do well on a day-to-day basis, because they're just not able to make sense out of the subject matter. Another element related to prior knowledge are students' misconceptions. We know that misconceptions are a normal consequence of trying to learn, but some misconceptions are serious impediments to learning. So when students come into a class with a very strong misconception or belief, that can really impair their learning as well. And then transfer of learning, which is probably the gold standard for successful teaching. That is, students' ability to take what they've learned and apply it in new contexts, is a really difficult challenge. Although most learning involves some transfer to some degree, I think all of us as classroom teachers have witnessed very frequently students' inability to transfer things that we think they know and should be able to transfer is very difficult for them.
And then a major problem in our digital world is selective attention. Students think they can multitask, they can switch their attention across multiple tasks when they really can't. And this plays out in the classroom, where students are distracted by smartphones or other digital devices, and that's a huge challenge for teaching. Then the final challenge we talked about are constraints of mental effort and working memory. And this is another one that often doesn't get a lot of attention. We have a limited amount of concentration available to us, which is called mental effort, or you can also look at it as capacity limitation of working memory, what used to be known as short-term memory, as only holding a set number of chunks before you start forgetting. So as you teach students, you have to pay attention to how they're using their available mental effort or their capacity, and they can be easily overwhelmed. And if they're overwhelmed, they're not going to learn anything. So you need to design pedagogy so that they have enough concentration or mental effort available to understand the concepts that you're presenting to them. So one final aspect to this, these cognitive challenges, they all interact with each other. So no single challenge stands alone. So for example, the greater the prior knowledge you have, then the easier it is going to be for students to learn, the less mental effort required, and then probably the more effective learning strategies, the better metacognition they're going to have. No single challenge stands alone. This is called a contextual approach, and this is something I think that is an advantage of this framework in that what it's saying is that all that learning contexts vary from each other. So what works to solve a challenge in one academic setting may not work in a different academic setting. In fact, what worked for one section of the class may not work for a different section of the exact same class. So this contextualist perspective says that you have to solve these challenges, but your solution may vary from class to class and may be different from someone else at a different class or a different institution. So what you need is a set of possible solutions that you can use to bring to bear on a particular class. And really what this is also saying is that there's no silver bullet in teaching, that there is no single best practice that's best for all classes and all teachers and all students and subjects. So that's the contextualist point of view. So what we have here is a set of videos that goes into more detail in each of these challenges. The videos start with a example of how these challenges might play out in the classroom. Then it talks about exactly what those challenges are and talks about the research that supports them or research about them. And then we give recommendations about how you might address these challenges. And then we end with resources that you can read more about how to address these challenges. And then we have some discussion questions. If you want to make these videos as part of professional development, then you can discuss these with questions with your colleagues. This video series is based on an article that Bill and I wrote for the Journal of Economic Education. So here's the reference for that. If you want to read more about the details about the development of the challenges and the research behind the challenges. So we hope that you will enjoy and benefit from this series of videos, and we will see you at the concluding video.